because they are gods who have historically interfered with human civilization and are about to do so again. Okay, so let's go on ahead and read the abstract of this study real quick, and then we'll discuss it. This is an accurate description of what's being shown in these video clips. Amorphous clouds of light that change color and change shape seemingly at will, whether it becomes a donut shape or a cone shape, cylinder or whatever. They hover in the sky. We've already established that they're social. A society is just a community of social creatures. Star people, focus on that. What's more, these extraterrestrials are, or perhaps ultra-terrestrials, are acknowledged by many indigenous groups as relatives or even ancestors. Okay, so the United States, primarily coastal states, have become beset by drones, which has drawn a lot of attention. Many suspect the drones are controlled by the US government for any of several reasons. Loads of speculation. What complicates all the speculation now, though, is what many are calling plasma orbs or plasmoids. More and more amateur footage is popping up of these plasma orbs, and in some cases the drones appear to be having hostile encounters with the orbs in the sky. What's even crazier is that the drones seem to be losing. Most perspectives on the orbs are Christian perspectives, referring to them as angels or demons. I'll be addressing what works and what doesn't work with that later. Now everyone's attention is on a study discussing plasmas. The research team consists of 11 renowned scientists, including emeritus astrophysicist Rudolf Schild at the Center for Astrophysics, a joint venture of Harvard University and the Smithsonian Institute, Dr. Carl Gibson, a professor of engineering physics and oceanography at the University of California, San Diego, Dr. Giorgio Bonciardi, an Italian astrobiologist at Università degli Studi di Siena in Tuscany with a reputation for advancing fractal geometry by applying it in novel ways to human pathology, and Dr. Mustafa Abu Safa, a Palestinian physicist at Palestine Polytechnic University in Hebron. This is just to name a few to demonstrate that this is an international team full of whale-in-a-pond experts who specialize in niches of already highly specialized fields. The rest of the team hails from Arizona, France, Ireland, Morocco, and Oklahoma. This team's research project was published on February 29th, 2024, in the 15th issue of the Journal of Modern Physics. Starting on page 322, we're going to read the abstract and discuss it, but here's the thesis of my argument today. The drone activity is a planned, forward-facing military exercise conducted without authorization from the legislative or executive branches of government, and its purpose was at least partly to lure the plasma orbs from the thermosphere in order to force the government to sanction anti-orb operations, because the plasmoids are sentient atmospheric life forms who are entering the troposphere with increasing frequency to such an extent that their activity has begun to threaten national security with both domestic and abroad. Moreover, the reason these orbs are descending more often in the first place is because they are gods who have historically interfered with human civilization and are about to do so again. Okay, so let's go on ahead and read the abstract of this study real quick, and then we'll discuss it. Quote, it says, plasmas up to 1 kilometer in size and behaving similarly to multicellular organisms have been filmed on 10 separate NASA space shuttle missions over 200 miles above Earth within the thermosphere. These self-illuminated plasmas are attracted to and may feed on electromagnetic radiation. They have different morphologies: cone, cloud, donut, spherical, cylindrical, these are the shapes, and have been filmed flying towards and descending from the thermosphere into thunderstorms, congregating by the hundreds and interacting with satellites, generating electromagnetic activity. approaching the space shuttles. Computerized analysis of flight path trajectories documents these plasmas travel at different velocities from different directions and change their angle of trajectory, making 45 degree, 90 degree, and 180 degree shifts and follow each other. They've been filmed accelerating, slowing down, stopping, congregating, engaging in hunter-predatory behavior, and intersecting plasmas, leaving a plasma dust trail in their wake. Similar lifelike behaviors have been demonstrated by plasmas created experimentally. Plasmas may have been photographed in the 1940s by World War II pilots, identified as Foo Fighters, repeatedly observed and filmed by astronauts and military pilots, and classified as unidentified aerial anomalous phenomenon. Plasmas are not biological, but may represent a form of pre-life that via the incorporation of elements common in space could result in the synthesis of RNA. Plasmas constitute a fourth state of matter, are attracted to electromagnetic activity, and when observed in the lower atmosphere likely account for many of the UFO UAP sightings over the centuries. This is an accurate description of what's being shown in these video clips. Amorphous clouds of light that change color and change shape seemingly at will, whether it becomes a donut shape or a cone shape, cylinder or whatever. They hover in the sky and also fly around, changing velocity and direction super rapidly. The difference, though, is that this study is definitely giving us some details that no one else has observed, which is that they can get as large as well over half a mile long. Now, the mysterious drones everyone's up in arms about have been consistently compared to automobiles to gauge their size, ranging from sedans to vans, even buses. When they interact with the orbs seem to be comparable to them in size, if not bigger, but they're definitely nowhere close to the size mentioned in this study. By contrast, these should be treated as baby plasmas, hence the use of the term plasmoids by some people. Offspring, in as much as they spring off of the actual plasmas, like in the form of that dust that they were talking about in the abstract. These things exhibit lifelike behaviors according to the study, which suggests that they have senses and cognition. They interact with each other, which means they're social. The giant ones apparently have a whole society in the thermosphere, which is about 200 miles up from where humanity lives. And I call it a society because, again, we've already established that they're social. A society is just a community of social creatures. The thermosphere is the second highest atmospheric layer. The study describes plasmas congregating, meaning they form groups and possibly get cliquish, tribal even. They show what the study calls hunter-predatory behavior. These are social creatures, and this is definitely a society. Also, it says they feed on electromagnetic radiation. Remember that for later. Now, I want to make sure we all remember what we were taught in our life sciences classes as kids or in astronomy. Human society and all living things occupy the troposphere, which is basically everything from sea level upwards 10 miles, give or take. Even our rain clouds are still in the troposphere. Above that is the stratosphere, and airplanes fly along the bottom of that, like right on top of the ozone layer. But there's a good 15 more miles of stratosphere above that, which is more space than the entire troposphere in which we live. Stay with me here. I'm going somewhere with this. Above that is the mesosphere. Meso meaning middle, because it's the middle layer, 2 layers beneath, 2 layers above it. Above that is the thermosphere. The thermosphere is where our focus is because that's where the plasma society lives. The atmosphere is a trapping of nitrogen and oxygen that surrounds and contains Earth. Put simply, it's the skies, plural, not singular, because each layer is a sky. What is a sky? A ceiling of nitrogen and oxygen. That's it. Now, in the thermosphere, we have all the satellites mankind has launched into orbit. Even the International Space Station is in the thermosphere. All mankind's orbiting inventions are crowding the thermosphere where plasmas live. The same way we encroach on the habitats of the deer and the antelope and the buffalo with our real estate developments, we also encroach on plasma civilization with our satellites and space stations. However, plasmas aren't hindered by this because they actually congregate around satellites regularly and generate electromagnetic activity near them in the process. What else is up there in plasma society? The Aurora Borealis. Anyone familiar with the Northern Lights knows it as this crazy light show in the sky, but we need to be on the same page about what causes it while we talk about plasmas. Very basically, solar storms, as in literal storm systems on the sun, shoot electrically charged particles in all directions, and the ones that reach Earth get caught in Earth's magnetic field and attracted to the north and south poles. That magnetic field is in the thermosphere. And remember, the study says plasmas are attracted to and even feed off of electromagnetic activity. The plasmas even briefly descend for large thunderstorms to graze in the lower clouds like cattle in fields of grass, because they're attracted to the sources of all that lightning we see. This is where those ionized particles collide with extant molecules in the thermosphere, which causes an energy exchange that looks like our entire color spectrum is dancing in the sky. That's Aurora Borealis. I promise I'm just about to get to the spiritual implications on all this, but the science has to be understood first for it to make sense. The most grandiose facet of the study is that which examines the fourth state of nature as a possible link to the origins of life itself. Did you catch that part? The three states of nature are solid, liquid, gaseous, and the fourth is plasmic, right? So the study's finding that plasmas are not only non-biological living things, but also beings whose composition points to elements in space coming together to synthesize ribonucleic acid, or RNA. All living things have RNA in their cells. On a construction site, DNA would be the blueprint, but RNA would be the developer, the company who builds according to the blueprint. All the team leaders would be mRNA, all the heavy machinery would be ribosomal RNA, the vendors for materials would be tRNA, and microRNA would be the project manager. The question of intelligent design is an ignorant one. We learned how to design from nature itself. It's in us to do it the way nature does it. Nature is designing and constructing life just as intentionally and intelligently as we build things. The construction part is ostensibly congenital in plasma. The colors of the Aurora Borealis come from particle collision, and plasmas change colors similarly, but in an ostensibly more controlled way. If you know anything about CERN, you know it's the site of the world's biggest, baddest particle collider. This is the forefront of pioneering research in physics today. CERN is the European Organization for Nuclear Research. It's a multinational and multidisciplinary laboratory based in Geneva, Switzerland, and the ubiquity of conspiracy theories about it is boundless. They're experimenting with the very concept we're talking about because they're trying to understand plasma and nuclear energy and radiation and stars on a deeper level. Stars have been mankind's fascination since antiquity, which finally brings us to the spiritual leg of this discussion. Atmos, a digital and print magazine that focuses on eco-journalism, published a piece in August 2023 about pre-Columbian American Indians rooting many of their spiritual beliefs in their historical traditions of contact with extraterrestrial beings. It's written by a Lakota Sioux Indian named Ruth Burns from the Standing Rock Indian Reservation. She wrote, quote, "The fact that the existence of UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, and potentially extraterrestrials is breaking news, it's more proof that indigenous erasure is real. Why? Because indigenous communities around the globe have been aware of the existence of UAPs for thousands of years and kept records of these encounters through oral tradition and artwork. Even today, ancient petroglyphs remain that share experiences indigenous peoples had with aircrafts of unknown origin, as well as non-human beings with unearthly histories. Among various native nations, these beings were often called sky people or star people. Star people, focus on that. What's more, these extraterrestrials are, or perhaps ultra-terrestrials, are acknowledged by many indigenous groups as relatives or even ancestors. The Hopi say their first home was in the Pleiades constellation, which they refer to as Chuhukon. The Cree Nation has legends that say their ancestors arrived on Earth as spirits from the stars. Traditionally, the Zuni also believed they were related to a kind of star people. The Lakota have star knowledge that we have passed down through the generations, beginning with the ancient ones. According to our belief system, each Lakota infant, she's talking about her own tribe now. According to our belief system, each Lakota infant is born with a spirit from a star, our Wanagi. When we die, our Wanagi returns to the stars, traveling through Wikakiu Hapi, with what Westerners call the Big Dipper. It is upon the Wanagi Takanku, Trail of Spirits, what Westerners refer to as the Milky Way Galaxy, where we are reunited with our ancestors.
Hey, first of all, like and subscribe to the channel, but also, Vnehlanukhi is recruiting, and if you don't know what Vnehlanukhi is, we're a grassroots activist group lobbying Congress to amend a bill to require education and research to acknowledge the Negro origins of Aboriginal groups of North America. If any of you have it to give, please support the campaign using the QR code on your screen, join the campaign with a donation, and if you have the time, you can even join our staff to help guide the organization, not just for this campaign, but also future endeavors. Don't speak about it, be about it. Let's go.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack in this excerpt, starting with the fact that this was written a year before all this talk of orbs. But let's deal with the so-called star people those tribes venerate. The Indians don't worship the star people. Many of these Plains Indians traditions viewed the star people as their celestial ancestors. What is an ancestor? Someone who participated in creating you. Your immediate creators are your ancestors, great-grandparents, and the like. These orbs, or plasmoids, being cited today are like tiny stars, and the plasmas from whom they descend are also like stars. They not only look like small stars, but also have the same molecular composition. Stars, like the sun, are made of plasma. They're just giant versions of what's inhabiting our thermosphere. Plasmas and plasmoids are stars as people on Earth. In my mother tongue, the Muskogee language, we called them Tinetki Rako Edelwa, the Great Thunder People. And like most of the southeastern ceremonial complex, we considered the sun and other stars to be the guides and teachers of humanity. They constituted the upper world, whereas the ocean and underground was considered the lower world, and what we now call troposphere was the middle world. All three levels were connected by an axis symbolized by the mighty invisible cedar tree, serving as this central pole that unites them all. That cedar tree is what we now call Axis Mundi, or just Earth's axis, connecting the planet's magnetic poles. Our ancestors believed the upper world was inhabited by what they called thunderers, which colonizers assumed was just a euphemism for lightning, but it was actually these plasmas whose descendants would descend to the middle world to communicate signs to the people. The southeastern ceremonial complex is the sum of cultural ideologies among nations like Salagi, Shikasha, Shata, Yuchi, Hichiti, Mikasuki, Kusa, Tuskegee, Koasati, Alabamo, Kusheta, Okfuski, Takabachi, Chiaha, Koweta, Kado, Apalachi, Kansa, countless others. My people were of Muskogee tribes and the Hichiti who joined the Muskogee Confederacy late. All are called Creek Indians by Euro-Americans. My people believed spirits, including those of earth, the sky, and the waters, occasionally transmitted messages to select human beings, especially children, so these plasmoids could be viewed as sky messengers in that sense. Emphasis on that term messenger, right? You know where Christians know where that's going. What the southeastern ceremonial complex viewed as thunder people east of the Great River or Mississippi were the same as what the Great Plains Indians viewed as star people west of the Mississippi. Both are plasmas, small stars who congregate in the thunderclouds and could be construed to be made of lightning. Now remember, The Lakota writer Burns was saying these star people or thunder people were like ancestors to them. Tribes that came out of the Mississippian culture saw it a bit differently, but both sides of the Mississippi agreed that when they died, they would go to these thunder star entities or become part of them. Death was seen as a transition to life among spirits, but the spirits were part of nature. Stars, rivers, the land in which you were buried. That means either these plasmas are their ancestors or their ancestors are a part of the plasmas, depending on which way you look at it. Here's the thing. All of this tracks with the Tanakh, but not the Bible. What I mean is that the Old Testament and New Testament are soteriologically opposed to one another because God is different and heaven is different from old to new. The Tanakh, of course, is the Old Testament, Torah, Nebi'im, Ketuvim, which is the teaching, the prophets, and the writings. Every time you see the word God in the New Testament, which is translated from Greek, it's a singular noun, Theos. In the Old Testament, which is translated from Hebrew, it's a plural noun, Elohim, derived from the words El and Chai. El means power or force, and Chai means life or living. Together they make Elohah, which is singular, meaning life force. So Elohim are life forces, the powers of being that keep living things alive. What are life forces? The elements. On a macro scale, the elements are grouped into armies like earth, wind, fire, water, lightning, stuff like that. On a micro scale, these armies consist of what you see on the periodic table, like hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, and so forth. This is why you often read the Old Testament using the term the Lord of Hosts. In Middle English, host meant army. We can verify that Elohim are the elements because they always manifest as elements. When Moses saw the fiery bush not burning, Exodus 3 says Yahweh waited until Moses was captivated by it, and then Elohim called out to Moses, not Yahweh. Yahweh speaks to Moses through multiple Elohim, who inhabit the bush as fire. The reason the word Elohim gets matched with singular pronouns and absolute articles is because Yahweh is the collective of all Elohim. When we later see the famous declaration, I am that I am, that's the Hebrew writers providing a folk etymology for the name Yahweh. In Hebrew, it's Eye Asher Eye, and Eye is a conjugation of Haya, which means to be. Yahweh is identifying as the very concept of being, saying, I am what allows you to say I am. In other words, I am existence, which is why the modern Hebrew term for existence is Hewaya, moving the first syllable of Yahweh to the end of the word. That's a product of morphemic drift from Paleo-Hebrew to Middle Hebrew. The He is unstressed, so you should be saying Yahweh, 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 Yahweh. Not Yahweh, not Yahuwah. So Yahweh is existence, which is basically the entire universe. What's the definition of the word universe? All existing matter and space considered as a whole. That's the definition. When Yahweh led the Israelites out of Egypt, it says she did this as a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night in Exodus 13, verses 21 and 22. But in verse 18 before that, it said Elohim led them out. That's because whatever the universe does, she uses her elements to do it. A pillar of cloud is a tornado, and a pillar of fire is an inferno or just a fiery tornado. Genesis 8 begins with a verse that demonstrates how the Great Flood was a controlled event. It was executed through Elohim, the elements. It says, Elohim, quote, Elohim made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters assuaged, end quote. Again, Elohim are the elements. This is who Genesis 1 credits with all of creation, too. A bunch of life forces who collectively created all things. Quote, in the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth. End quote. And they refer to themselves in the same passage using plural pronouns, saying, Let us make man in our image. Evolutionary theory agrees that the elements of our world are the source of life itself. It proposes that natural selection chose short replicating RNA molecules in the primordial soup to develop life. And the primordial soup was this hot collection of water vapor on primitive Earth's surface with carbon, hydrogen, and ammonia, if not also many other elements. This was the condition that allowed living microorganisms to be created by the functions of those RNA molecules. This directly pertains to the Cherokee Great Spirit called Vnehlanukhi. And today, the Tsalagi definition of the word is one who created. However, when you break down the morphemes used to make this word in the Tsalagi language, it derives from the words Uneha and Gotlunuchi. Uneha means he has water, or he has liquid, actually. And Gotlunuchi means created. So the meaning of the name Vnehlanukhi is he who possesses the liquid created. It's referring to the Great Spirit as the owner of the primordial soup in which life was made. How did they even know there was a primordial soup if they didn't have evolutionary science? Where did that knowledge come from? Genesis 1 verse 2, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. The deep, a literary term for what? The ocean, or water. And the spirit of Elohim moved upon the face of the waters. Waters. See what I'm saying? What waters? If we're at the very beginning. How's there already water? The primordial soup. The life forces moved upon the primordial soup. That's what caused extant RNA to give way to microorganisms. Genesis 2 verse 7. And Yahweh Elohim formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. When you put Yahweh and Elohim together, by the way, Yahweh Elohim means forces of nature, or powers of existence, or elements of the universe. The elements of the universe created human beings. Earth formed man, and wind animated him by giving him the breath of life. Creek Indians refer to the Great Spirit as Hesáketvmesee, meaning master of breath, because he imbued you with the sacred wind that sustains your life. Do you see it yet? The singular proper noun God in the Bible is a misnomer masking the truth. Aside from the fact that that the very least they could have done is put gods instead of God, they are the elements. And anyone who has seen this channel before knows that we constantly explore evidence that certain American Indian tribes, not all, but certain American Indian tribes, are in fact the lost tribes of Israel.
All right, staying on Capitol Hill in a classified briefing, lawmakers met for more than 2 hours with government officials on those mysterious drone sightings. Officials are still trying to convince the public that there's nothing to see here. Tom Hansen has the latest.
The military's putting these drones in the air because drones emit radio waves, and radio waves are a form of electromagnetic radiation which attracts the orbs. By deploying such massive drones in such large numbers, they're maximizing their radiation output to deliberately lure the Plasmoids. This forces the executive and legislative branches to grapple with the orbs, which they had to have known about, but likely downplayed this whole time. This is probably what all the congressional testimony for the past 2 years was supposed to achieve, but lawmakers have been deprioritizing the problem. These orbs pose some kind of threat to national security that top brass like SOCOM officials, for example, take seriously, but that politicians haven't so far. That plasma study from the Journal of Modern Physics actually says plasmas are congregating around satellites and generating EMP pulses, which might occasionally leave military SATCOM deaf and blind. That's a legitimate threat to national security, especially if they're doing this more and more often. These drone exercises might be designed to force plasmoids into the open and thereby force Capitol Hill and the White House to authorize anti-orb operations of some kind. Whatever threat the orbs pose may also be due to the elements galvanizing against the colonizer to restore the indigenous peoples.